might have seen my popular videos about the world-famous Museum of Modern Art in New York City, also known as MoMA. But today I'm at MoMA Mex, the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City. Called El Museo de Arte Moderno in Spanish, it was conceived in the 1960s to showcase the modern art of this rising power. It's situated not far from the National Museum of Anthropology in the beautiful Chapultepec Park near the upscale neighborhood of Polanco. And it contains one of the most famous paintings in the world, the Mona Lisa of Mexico. I'm going to tell you all about it. You probably already are guessing, but it has some other truly stunning and jaw-dropping paintings too that you just have to see. So let's go inside. For those of you who'd like to visit or are in Mexico City, the permanent collection here is actually really small. It's just 2 rooms, but the works that they do have pack an outsized punch, starting with the first one. So let's do a countdown all the way to number 1. Counting backwards, starting with number 6, which is awesome. It's called Multiple Self-Portrait, Auto Retrato Multiple by Juan O'Gorman from 1950. This is a really fun painting to look at and explore. I was so excited when I saw it. Let's learn a little bit about Juan O'Gorman. So he was born in Coyoacan, Mexico, which is part of Mexico City, born in 1905. He was a renowned architect, muralist, and painter, and his career bridged functional modernism and fantastical art. You could see both of that going on here. He was actually well known for designing the iconic studio houses of Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo, who was married to Diego Rivera, was a schoolboy friend of Juan O'Gorman. And so we're talking about that famous house that connected Frida and Diego Rivera with a bridge, which is kind of a perfect relationship setting, in my opinion. O'Gorman later shifted his focus to painting as a medium to explore surrealism and introspection. This multiple self-portrait represents a culmination of his artistic and intellectual pursuits, blending precision with symbolic complexity to reflect on his multifaceted identity as an artist, an architect, and as a Mexican. This painting features a fragmented narrative where multiple versions of O'Gorman coexist within a surreal, layered composition. So the things that were going on in the rest of the art world, Salvador Dali and the other famous modern art painters, it's being mirrored here in Mexican art really wonderfully. So here, one of his hands paints a painter who in turn is painting a self-portrait. We can also think back to Vermeer's famous painting in the Kunsthistorisches Museum. To the right, another version of O'Gorman reflects his profile and the surrounding open landscape. Standing tall, O'Gorman the architect occupies the upper left, holding the painting's intricate structure together. His inclusion of a small devil retouching the architect's figure with a palette playfully nods to his mastery of muralism. So all of these interconnected figures embody the interplay between the personal and the professional roles O'Gorman inhabited. We see this happening a lot in Mexican art where people are using art as an expression of finding their identity, and there are often multiple identities. We'll see that coming up with Frida Kahlo. But this painting by O'Gorman, it also includes fantastical and allegorical elements, something that was also common in Mexican modern art. Very interesting. You also think of Colombian literature when you start thinking of these fantastical kind of allegories. So let's talk about some of these fantastical, really cool elements, such as the fiery figure atop a false chimney that references naturalistic fantastical landscapes, one of O'Gorman's recurring inspirations. 3 canaries deliver cryptic messages. One critiques the self-portrait, another seeks painting advice, and the third leaves behind a mysterious letter. Overhead, the sun and the moon hang like ornaments, while animals weave in and out of the composition, carrying symbolic messages. These elements infuse the painting with the sense of fable and myth, reinforcing its surreal and introspective tone. O'Gorman's attention to detail and architectural sensibility are very much evident in the painting's harmonious yet intricate structure. So while it's grounded in surrealism, the composition feels logical in its coexistence of diverse elements. O'Gorman invites the viewer in to question their own role as observer, suggesting that the only unfragmented presence in the work might be the viewer themselves. Multiple self-portrait right here is both a visual autobiography and a meditation on national identity. This one's really cool and definitely edgy for the time. It's called The Soccer Players, Las Futbolistas, by Angel Zárraga, or Ángel Zárraga, from 1922. So Ángel Zárraga, born in Durango, Mexico in 1886, was one of the early Mexican modernists to gain international acclaim. We'll see that later Diego Rivera definitely achieved international acclaim, and Frida Kahlo eventually becoming the most famous Mexican painter that we all now know about. We'll see that coming up. But Zárraga's career blossomed in Paris, where he lived for several decades. Remember, at the time of modern art, and even before that, Paris was the center of the art world. So Mexico was definitely contributing to that. So he lived there for several decades, immersing himself in the avant-garde movements of the time. He was deeply influenced by classical painting traditions, and he combined these with modernist techniques, focusing on themes of human strength and resilience. So here you can see his fascination with physicality and his exploration of contemporary life right here in The Soccer Players. It's a groundbreaking depiction of female athletes at a time when women's sports were just starting to gain social recognition. Remember, in the classical world, you would only see women as kind of sex objects or a model in the background, not as active sports players. Mexico is becoming a modern country, and the art is reflecting that. So here we have three strong athletic women standing against an industrial backdrop. Again, the modernization of Mexico. Their sturdy, muscular legs are emphasized, capturing their physical prowess, while their poses exude a sense of pride and determination. A lot of the art made around this time was about national pride. Mexico's coming into its own. They're dressed in simple sportswear. The figures symbolize this new era of female empowerment. Zárraga's dynamic composition with strong diagonals and a muted yet earthly palette reflects his mastery of the human form and his ability to convey both motion and solidity and strength at the same time. The work is very notable for its personal connection to Zárraga's life in Paris. One of the figures is modeled on Jeanette Ivanov, a member of Les Sportives de Paris soccer team, which won France's first women's soccer championship in 1922. Zárraga's portrayal of female athletes was revolutionary, challenging traditional representations of women in art as the passive or the decorative. Instead, he celebrated their agency and physicality and the shifting societal attitudes of the time. This is one of the best paintings you'll ever see in your life. If you get a chance to go to this Museo de Arte Moderno if you're in Mexico City, don't miss it. It's called The Mayan Hut, in Spanish, Bohío Maya, and it's by Julio Castellanos, and it's from 1922. Spend 10 minutes looking at this one. It's so fantastical and amazing, deep and rich with Mexican culture and introspection on what that culture means. Julio Castellanos was born in 1905 in Mexico City. Most of the famous painters were. He was a central figure in the Mexican modernist movement. He was known for his ability to blend, you'll see that right here, realism with elements of fantasy. So he's blending traditional art movements with modern art. He frequently drew inspiration from Mexico's indigenous traditions and rural landscapes. But to me, he also has elements of being the Mexican Salvador Dali. His experiences traveling through the Yucatan influenced the Mayan hut, which captures the harmony between nature and human life while giving it those surrealist undertones. The painting here features a semi-open structure with a thatched roof, typical of Mayan architecture. Inside are women dressed in flowing white garments, performing subtle activities while children interact with the elements of nature, a blue butterfly and a parrot. A spilled jug of water on the floor and the casual poses of the figures create an atmosphere of serenity and detachment, while the muscularity of the women's forms contrasts with the delicacy of their gestures. This juxtaposition enhances the dreamlike, fairy-like quality of this work. Castellanos' warm, earthly palette evokes the lushness of the Yucatan landscape, while his soft brushstrokes lend the painting a tactile richness. The scene's quiet intimacy reflects Castellanos' poetic approach to everyday life. So we can see a bit of romanticism here mixed with realism, which are basically two opposing movements. Very interesting. The women in the painting take the magic, mystery, and chaos, they take it all in stride, observing the fallen jug and the acrobatic antics with basically indifference and tranquility. Castellano is clearly hearkening us to a simpler time and a way of life, giving us a dose of magic. This is one of my favorite still lifes in all of art history. It's called Still Life with a Toothbrush, Naturaleza Muerta con Cepillo de Dientes, and it's by a woman, Maria Izquierdo, from about 1928. It really pops at you, and I'm about to explain to you why. So, another one of the most important artists of the post-revolutionary Mexico is Maria Izquierdo. Remember, after the revolution, Mexico is very much forming its own identity as a modern nation committed to all of its people. So Maria Izquierdo was born in 1902 in the state of Jalisco, Mexico. She was the first Mexican woman to have a solo exhibition in the United States, before Frida Kahlo. Often overshadowed by her contemporaries like Diego Rivera and Frida, Izquierdo's work is now recognized for its unique blend of surrealism, Mexican folk traditions, and her personal introspection. Her art frequently centered on themes of domesticity, femininity, and cultural identity, as seen right here in the still life with Toothbrush. This still life painting features an arrangement of everyday objects, like still lifes have for hundreds of years, including the unconventional inclusion of that toothbrush here. This mundane item, what it does is it challenges the classical still life tradition, elevating the ordinary into the realm of fine art. So it's posing all these questions about what a new nation means and what ordinary people could contribute to this vast world of fine art and culture. It's set against a textured and slightly abstract background. The objects are carefully composed, creating a harmonious yet dynamic visual balance. Much like one of my favorites, Vincent van Gogh, Izquierdo uses bold colors and thick brushstrokes to add to the richness and depth, and they really pop off the painting if you ever get a chance to see it in real life, while her flattened perspective and subtle distortions give the composition a surreal quality. Van Gogh also did some of this. The toothbrush's presence injects modernity, like a shot, into the traditional genre, symbolizing this intersection of domestic life and contemporary culture. It also does something very particularly Mexican here. It rejects European artistic norms in favor of creating a distinctly Mexican aesthetic. Number two, before we get down to the number one Mona Lisa of Mexico, this is also one of the most famous Mexican painters. His name is Rufino Tamayo, but his work is actually a little bit harder to grasp. It's not as direct. This work is called Tribute to the Indian Race, in Spanish, Homenaje a la Raza India, and it's from 1952. So Rufino Tamayo was born in Oaxaca, Mexico in 1899, and he grew up surrounded by those vibrant colors and textures of indigenous culture. His Zapotec heritage profoundly influenced his art, which often celebrated Mexico's indigenous roots while blending them with modernist styles. Tamayo sought to distinguish himself from the politically charged murals of Diego Rivera and others by focusing on universal themes. This tribute to the Indian race, which was completed in 1952, is the only mural from the Mexican School of Painting housed in this museum. The painting depicts a central figure of a flower vendor surrounded by cascading, oversized flowers. Those are symbolizing beauty, vitality, and resilience of indigenous culture. The very, very rich reds, ochres, and the greens create a luminous palette that dominates this massive canvas, much bigger than life-size. Tamayo's tactile brushwork emphasizes the texture, while his geometric organization, think Picasso here, geometry, lends the work a sense of modern abstraction. So, unlike the narrative-driven murals of Rivera or Orozco, one of my absolute favorites, you can see his pieces in Guadalajara, can't wait to take you there, this piece celebrates indigenous identity through symbolism rather than historical storytelling. Commissioned for international exhibitions, the mural traveled to cities like Paris and Stockholm, showcasing Mexican culture on a global stage. Its portability reflects Tamayo's modernist approach, moving away from the immovable, site-specific murals of his peers and predecessors like Diego Rivera. Tamayo is a name in Mexican art that you shouldn't forget, but nobody forgets our next artist. Are you ready for the Mexican Mona Lisa? Here it is. Number 1, Two Fridas, Las Dos Fridas by Frida Kahlo. This painting was painted in 1939, right at the end of the Great Depression and the beginning of the Second World War. Frida Kahlo, the most famous Mexican artist now by far and a worldwide celebrity ever since the movie was Salma Hayek, was born in 1907 in Coyoacan, Mexico, a neighborhood of Mexico City that we talked about earlier. You can actually still visit her house today. Frida, simply, as many people refer to her, is known for her deeply personal and symbolic works of art. Kahlo's life was marked by physical suffering, including a near-fatal bus accident that left her with lifelong pain and numerous surgeries throughout her life. Her turbulent marriage to Diego Rivera, the most famous muralist in all of Mexican art, was another significant influence on her art, as their relationship was characterized by both passion and betrayal, two universal themes in art and human life. Here, the two Fridas, painted during their divorce in 1939, reflects this personal turmoil while also exploring Frida's dual identity as she felt it. The painting represents two versions of Frida Kahlo seated side by side, holding hands. On the left, she wears a white European-style dress. Remember, she was partly Hungarian-European ancestry, representing her connection to colonial influences and her rejection by Rivera. Her heart is exposed and bleeding, with a vein trailing into her lap, clamped shut with surgical scissors, yet still pooling blood onto her dress. On the right, Kahlo wears a traditional Tehuana dress, symbolizing her indigenous heritage and cultural identity that Diego Rivera admired. Her heart is intact here, and she holds a locket with Rivera's image. The two Fridas are linked by a single vein, symbolizing the shared pain and love between those two selves. This is also very fascinating because, we're not far from the time of Sigmund Freud. People are starting to talk about psychology and identity, things that were never talked about before. All of this is reflected in art and art history. That's why modern art and any kind of art is so fascinating and a reflection of history and people. The stormy sky here in the background echoes the emotional intensity of the entire scene. Kahlo's precise, almost surreal anatomical details, like the exposed hearts and veins, highlight her connection to medical illustration, a skill that she developed during her recovery from her many surgeries and illnesses. Drawing from Mexican folk art and votive painting, the work incorporates intricate textures and symbolic elements. It transcends its autobiographical roots to become a universal meditation on love, loss, and self-reconciliation. Kahlo's feminist legacy shines brightly in this painting, as she portrays women not as objects of desire, but as subjects of introspection. The juxtaposition of her indigenous and European identities mirrors broader cultural tensions in Mexico following the Mexican Revolution. Through its raw emotional depth and power, The Two Fridas remains one of Kahlo's most celebrated works, the true Mona Lisa of Mexico, because it changes the way we see art and Mexico forever. You've just seen 6 of the greatest paintings in all of Mexican art and probably all of Latin America, including Frida Kahlo's Mona Lisa of Mexico, here at the Museum of Modern Art in beautiful Mexico City. Okay, I may have given it the name the Mexican Mona Lisa, but I think art critics just haven't caught up to me yet. But right here in the same city, in the same park actually, is the best museum in all of Latin America, for sure. It has artifacts, including the Aztec sunstone and blood receptacles that will chill and thrill you as you explore this fantastic and culturally overflowing, abundant country, and city. You have to check out this next video if you want to understand Mexico and Latin America, and if you love great museums. Do not go to this museum without checking out this video. It'll overwhelm you, and this will help it make it so rich for you. I can't wait. And for more modern art, check out my videos about MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, where I go into depth into the greatest modern art museum in the entire world in New York City. Also has a Frida Kahlo there. So check out MoMA in New York if you want to see Frida with chopped hair. Please let me know in the comment section which painting was your favorite of the 6 that I went over today. And I'll respond and I'll let you know mine. I really want to hear your feedback. Make sure to click like and subscribe to help support this channel and to keep me traveling to these amazing museums. See you in just a second.